What up, y'all? It's D. Wells, Obsessive Sneaker Disorder, and I hope you're doing well. I hope you're feeling good despite all that's going on in the world right now with the coronavirus. Now more than ever, as I've aptly called it, the Great Reset, where things in life have changed for all of us, but more importantly, it's also brought us all together, or to stop and think about how we're all interconnected. We are all interconnected, no matter what race, color, creed, sexual orientation, doesn't matter. This virus doesn't pick and choose. So I hope you're good. I hope your family and tribe is safe. I've been really thinking about, the OSD podcast, and particularly, I don't know if I've ever really told the story of how it got started and where the idea came from. So I wanted to begin there in the beginning, which actually goes back to 2007 when the first episode of the OSD podcast was recorded. I actually recorded in my then basement at home in Worcester, Massachusetts, and decided very quickly after that first episode of me ranting. And if you can find it, make sure you tell me exactly how many minutes that first episode of the OSD podcast is. I want to hear from you. Just at me at DWellsOSD. But the idea for it actually started decades before. And I'll give you the backstory. So many of you know that I've grew up in the U.S. Virgin Islands, born in St. Thomas, grew up in St. John, commuted by boat every day to go to school from, 6th grade on, really commuted every day. And I listened to a lot of radio. I listened to a lot of WSTA 1340 AM, which is still on the air in the U.S. Virgin Islands. I listened to Aisle 95 and other stations that played music, be it rock and roll, be it calypso, soca, reggae, you name it. I listened to it all. I grew up listening to it all. So I was always intrigued by radio and the fact that someone could actually listen to someone's voice and it have an impact. And then fast forward to being able to travel, to visit family and travel to Puerto Rico or travel to New York City particularly, where that's really where music and the radio impacted me directly. And I'll tell you about this. So when I'd go to New York, I'd go to two places. I'll go to Laurelton, Queens, or I'd go to the Bronx to see family. And eventually I'll fast forward and tell you about my Brooklyn story, how I ended up in Brooklyn. But at a young age, the first place I went to was Queens and then the Bronx. And 98.7 KISS FM, huge station in New York City. Everyone listened to it. WBLS 107.5. Their programming has since changed, but those were the two stations that I could listen to and hear great music that I never heard before, but particularly hearing rap music. And my first introduction to rap was Kurtis Blow, and it was on an 8-track cassette. Not many people know what 8-tracks are, but look it up, Google it, use the internet, you can figure out what an 8-track is. Kurtis Blow, who just had some serious major surgery. Shout out to you, impacting my life. Fast forward many years, you're walking in the parade in St. Thomas, and not many people knew who you were, but I knew who you were because of your music impacting me at a very young age in the Virgin Islands. You probably didn't realize that, but yeah, we were listening to your music. So Kurtis Blow, salute and thank you. Hip hop, rap, music, 98.7 KISS, WBLS, DJ Red Alert, Mr. Magic. Those DJs, hearing their voices, them playing songs and breaking songs before anyone else was mind-blowing to me. So much so that what I used to do is I used to actually take my money, go to the post office in St. John, get a money order, fill it out, and mail it to relatives stateside so they could then buy cassette tapes to then tape shows off of the radio from New York. I actually did that for relatives in New York, and I did it with relatives in Chicago. Crazy, right? To think about. Again, I wanted them to record music off of the radio, commercials and all, so I could hear these songs. So I heard Dougie Fresh, the show, well before it made its way to the U.S. Virgin Islands. Lottie Dottie. And again, KRS-One, Boogie Down Productions, Big Daddy Kane. I could go on and on about artists. Queen Latifah, Moni Love, Salt and Pepper, Kid and Play. That was my whole world. And then by my cousin Andrew in Chicago introducing me to EPMD and a lot of the West Coast rappers. Even though he was in Chicago, he was listening to music that had a West Coast vibe to it. So music and ultimately hip hop led me to be paying attention to audio. And I have a love of music. I've played a couple instruments myself, but I was always moved by the DJ and the on-air personality. And sometimes that was one and the same. So when, DJs have their certain call phrases or catchphrases or sounds. I mean, DJ Red Alert, where he sampled his son in the beginning. Again, huge to me. Very, very big. That's what led me to eventually becoming a DJ, having a college radio show at Bryant University in Smithfield while I was in college, becoming the music director for hip hop and R&B at Bryant, advising later on in life the radio station at the College of the Holy Cross. So music has always played a role, and that's what led to the OSD podcast. I knew that when the internet came online and music was being shared with MP3 and WAV files and things like that, I was like, there has to be a way to take this internet and stack the radio on top of it so that people can listen to it when they want. Like you and me can listen to what we want to when we want to, cut out all the stuff that we don't need, the commercials and stuff, and just get to the meat and potatoes. And that was what caused or what birthed the OSD podcast. And from there, just adding people like Paper Chaser, bringing him on board, completely revolutionized, changed things big time. In his forward thinking of, okay, we have this podcast, now let's bring other people on as part of the crew and have this core group. And we call ourselves the Sole Doctors, and then the listeners became the Disorderlies, and just growing from there. And then pushing fast forward even doing video when Google rolled out Google Hangouts on air, to now not just have the audio podcast, but now you can actually see us. And you can see us in our respective homes and offices and things like that, and be able to do a show. Like literally one time, a lot of people may not know this, but 2015 was a huge year for me and my family because we had a number of deaths. We had, I think it was like 5 members of our family die in 3 months. And and I can't even say the most impactful one because they all impacted me in different ways. But the one that hurt the most, me the most, was when my grandmother was ill and eventually died. I actually did an OSD podcast from my grandmother's front lawn in St. Thomas, while she was inside the house with my mom and wasn't speaking. She wasn't moving. And I'll never forget doing that show. People were like, they could hear the cookies. They could hear the crickets. And yes, I was in my grandmother's front yard in St. Thomas doing the talk show because it was that important to keep it going. I don't think I've ever shared that with anyone. Because we became part of so many people's lives with the OSD talk show and podcast. We became part of your family, and you became part of my family. And then when we would meet in person in real life, it just made it even better. So I'm going to wrap up there with part 1 of the beginning of OSD, the Obsessive Sneaker Disorder Talk Show podcast. I'm going to break this down into other pieces. So there'll be a part 2, part 3, part 4. I don't know where this is going to go. I'm just going off the top of my head, what comes to mind, what I'm feeling right now. But more importantly, I hope that where you are at this exact moment, that you are remembering to, as we always say, tell the people that you love them. Keep your laces tight, your tongue loose, walk good, because we certainly are not promised tomorrow. So y'all be safe. I love you. You're born to be great. We're going to get through this. We are going to get through this. So until next time, y'all be safe. Much love. Peace.